Hi everyone, today we will walk through a solution leveraging UiPath capabilities around document processing, specifically a niche capability known as DeepRAG, in the effort to process credit agreements. Credit agreements are extremely long and complex unstructured documents. These are typically handled in the commercial lending space and processed by corporate trust teams. These documents could have a variety of requirements associated with them. From an example we worked with, there were three main pillars of functionality required from an agentic solution. These documents need to have fields extracted from them. So think about 100 plus fields across a document that may be 500-600 pages. This alone would take 30 to 45 minutes of time from someone individually having to manually go through all of this information. And you could see that step called out here directly within the business process workflow. The other key capability required here is signature field detection. If there are signatures throughout the document, those pages need to be notified, cited, as well as a determination, is the document actually signed on that page or is the signature field left blank? And then lastly, but definitely not the least, is the amortization determination agent. So in this scenario, when we process these credit agreements, these are commercial lending documents. They could have one loan in the agreement. There could be multiple loans in the agreement. For every single loan or tranche, there has to be intelligence to determine what is the actual amortization schedule for all of these loans. And that is usually not listed explicitly. It is usually something that you have to basically build from the ground up, picking apart the different metadata required, such as rates, such as years, terms, first payment date, etc., in order to build that amortization schedule. So these are three core things that takes just an enormous amount of time for teams to do manually today. If you think about the velocity of agreements that a corporate trust team can be processing, there could be hundreds of these that have to be intaked, ingested, and processed in a very little amount of time. And then ultimately integrating back into upstream and downstream systems, human in the loop processing, etc., to make sure that while we're using agency and advanced capabilities, we are having a human governance oversight. Now, I mentioned earlier a key component to this, known as DeepRAG, and that is very integral to the solution that we're about to see in the demonstration next. DeepRAG takes retrieval augmented generation a step further. It is extremely useful in the agent space within UiPath, and what it does is it takes a document and before doing any queries or retrievals, it chunks it into smaller pieces. This breaks down the document and leads to several outcomes: higher accuracy from a query perspective, as well as faster processing time and working more efficiently within the realm of token limits. Essentially, after the document's chunked, the data will be retrieved and context will be created, as well as citations. And then those will be synthesized, and that is actually what the agent is going to be querying. So not only do you have a smaller and more accurate bite-sized piece of information to interact with, but you also have native citations. So there's a feedback of, okay, I found this answer on this page, and that could also be used in the human in the loop process for a validation. So with that, and without further ado, let's jump into the demonstration. Before we get into the technology, one thing we need to look at is, what is a credit agreement? I mentioned they're unstructured documents. They're very long documents. We need to extract different information and fields from them. We need to interact with signatures and determine if they're signed, which pages are present, etc. And we also need to determine what are all the loans in this agreement. And for those loans, what are all the metadata required that is listed in plain text that ultimately needs to be extracted and then used as an input to build an amortization schedule. And then we'll see an example of this in the live run. Just wanted to show you the document itself. As you could see, this is a public URL. Oftentimes these documents are listed on the SEC website. You as a customer or someone interested in UiPath could easily find your document that's there, most likely, if you are processing these in the commercial lending space. As I just navigate through this, you could see a lot of text, a lot of pages, a lot of unstructured content that we're going to have to intelligently interact with using the UiPath technology as well as DeepRAG and facilitate the extraction. So with that, I am going to kick off a live run and we will be able to see that here. You could see I just kicked off a live process here. As soon as I dive into this, we're able to see a live agentic workflow and pretty much bring the slide we just saw to life. If we look at this workflow, you could see the green nodes have already been completed, and you could see the blue ones are currently in action. If we step left to right here, you could see a new batch of credit agreements have been received. Currently, we're processing the PDF I just showed in the browser, and we're going to first interact with some systems, create a record within the loan system, and also do a secure intake. Now, the focus really is going to be how we interact with these credit agreements. And you can see these 3 agents running here directly within Maestro. Maestro is going to be our agentic solution for processing this use case, as well as many other use cases. Today, we're honing in on credit agreements. But if you think about the nature of this, it's ingestion, analysis, interpretation, and extraction, and then ultimately having human governance in the loop here, and then updating downstream systems. That design pattern, if you will, is transferable across a multitude of different use cases. Furthermore, within Maestro, we're able to architect these processes, but you're also able to see a very robust trail of information down here at the bottom. We can see what steps have been completed, like setting up the new client record and monitoring the receipt of the agreements. And now for the agents that are running in parallel, we could see exactly what is happening. So the first is going to be the entity extraction. This is going to be the extraction of different fields from the document. So extract the full name of the borrower from the credit agreement. This is going to be facilitating that field query response. We could see the response here. The full legal name of the borrower is Frighten Company, and that will go one by one, querying the document, looking for the specific entity, and retrieving that information. In this example, we're using agents in DeepRAG to facilitate this component. However, it is worth noting that this entity extraction piece is very well purposed for our document processing solution IXP, which natively has a lot of capabilities in measurement components to make sure that is an enterprise process. Next, if we look at some of the output calls from the signature field detection agent, this is going to be looking for all of the information in the document that is going to have a certain signature field, and then searching for those programmatically one by one, as well as using image recognition to determine if they're signed. Maestro gives a extremely nice audit trail of all of the LLM calls, all the input-output schemas to different models, the search text, the models that are being used, the tokens, et cetera, and natively integrating with RPAs as well to do any type of more traditional search, and coming back to you with that comprehensive picture that is complete. So within the signature field detection agent, which we'll see the output once it's done running, our goal is to get a list of every single page that has a signature field, and then also a determination of whether there is a signature present as well. Now, the last agent here, which we'll walk through a little bit, is going to be the amortization. Now, this is probably the most complex piece here. This is running in parallel, and this is what is going to parse the document, understand, and actually build the amortization schedule based on key inputs. The first thing to do here is, if we look at this query, identify all term type tranches. They could be term loans, delayed draw loans, term loan A, term loan B, etc. And then once we have that list, we need to go one by one and pull out all relevant information. You can see a response here. There's certain text that has come back, as well as citations and page numbers to further validate that example. Now I'm going to let this run for a little bit, and then we will see exactly what it looks like from a human in the loop perspective, as well as from an agent perspective once this is completed. So I will go ahead and let this go for a little bit. Now that the last parallel agent has finished within Maestro and all three agents are complete, we go to the next step. Maestro has the capability to run processes in parallel, but also the logic to hold the business process until all components have been finished. We could see here, we had normalization activities, taking output schemas and payloads from the agents and normalizing that data to make it relatively available for human validation. Now, before we see what this looks like in the human review step, let's take a peek behind the covers briefly at the amortization agent and see exactly on the back end how we have architected this solution. So this is what an agent looks like within the UiPath platform. And this is what we call Agent Builder. It's a low-code interface for building agentic capabilities. And as you could see, everything you would expect from an enterprise agent is readily available. We have model selection here. We could choose from out-of-the-box models that we provide that run serverlessly on our cloud platform, or you could bring your own model as well. We have context. So think of this in this use case as the document itself, one PDF that we need to extract details from and use to build that amortization schedule. But this could also be multiple documents if you're talking about a use case where you're having to fetch across different policies and provide some type of response. So everything you would expect from a RAG capability here. And we have the flexibility to choose our search strategy. In this instance, we're using DeepRAG given the complexity of what we're processing and the need for specificity, but you also have semantic or structured search options available as well. Two things we are not using but are also important: MCP server integration as well as escalations. Think of escalations as a built-in native human review process that also gives feedback to the agent's long-term memory, and using MCP servers to facilitate access to tools, whether that MCP server resides in UiPath or outside of UiPath. And then also, one of the most common things in the markets talked about as well is agent protocols. In Agent Builder, we're leveraging other agents as tools. And this is how we're able to run this process and effectively get all of the information from the document. We have a tool here to run and return the amortization tiers. So for each loan, sometimes a loan could be one interest rate. Sometimes a loan could also be multiple rates. There could be, let's say, a 2% rate for the first 4 years, and then maybe that jumps to 7% for the remainder of the duration. These are different tools that have been built within UiPath. They could be APIs, they could be other agents, they could be RPAs, and essentially at runtime, the agent will use these as needed in order to achieve its job. Now, we saw what the execution trace looks like within Maestro, but we can also see that history directly here within Agent Builder as well. We can see the different tool calls, the different input data, as well as the output data, what the agent's output was. So for maturity date, the actual value returned, that full trace here. And then we could also add them to evaluation sets, essentially scoring how the agent does across prompt changes, tools changes, etc., and having built-in regression testing to see and benchmark the LLM's actual performance. So a lot of capabilities within the low-code interface for building these enterprise agents with all the traceability, evaluation sets, guardrails, overall scoring of the agent as well, based on how it was configured in the metadata available to the algorithms within the tool. Now that we've had a peek into the back end of how the amortization agent runs, let's go over into our action center. And we could see 3 minutes ago, I have a new task assigned to me, and see exactly what this looks like from a human in the loop perspective. Now, with technology, especially as you're rolling things out into production, you may want to have a set of eyes on things, or you may have certain thresholds that need to go to a human for validation. And that experience needs to be extremely seamless. If we think about the 3 agents that we just saw, one is entity extraction, one is signature field detection, and the last one is amortization. In this application interface, we could see one in very easy terms, who signed the document. If I click here, it'll take me directly through that page. So we're able to build trust by having attributions and page citations directly within the document. We could see that for signatures. We could see the different blocks that are dynamically created based on what data was retrieved through the DeepRAG for these entities as well. And then lastly, for amortization, we have the details that have been extracted, and these are basically the key inputs into building the amortization schedule, such as the amount, the term, the rate, first payment date, etc., and also a direct ability here to actually download that amortization schedule in a Excel format and use it for any type of downstream processing. Now, lastly, here I am going to go ahead and click the approve button down here at the bottom. And this is going to go off and kick off the rest of our workflow. So if we go here, we can see it's actually already completed. I clicked approve, that kicked off the change of events. Think about system updates, logs, saving final versions, as well as communications to the different teams. And just to show you a view of what this looks like in Orchestrator, if I go ahead and refresh the job runs within this folder specifically, we could see a very nice trace. This will show us in a little bit of a cleaner view, more for an admin or someone who's just looking at the data, and augment the view we get from within Maestro. I could see the different agents and a nice GUI, what the query was, what the text was that was returned back, the citations. Here are all the fields that I needed to extract. Next, we get into signature field detection, my different prompts, my PDF RPA tool to actually do the image validation, as well as the page analysis. And then lastly, the amortization tool, where we're going to be essentially identifying every tranche within the document. And then for all of those, dynamically generating agentic loops. If there's multiple tranches identified, we have to have the logic to run this maturity date call every single time for every relevant loan, right? Or have the logic that says, if we cannot find a maturity date, how can we reverse engineer and back calculate one? Because that is going to be something very key to the actual amortization build. And you can see here, good example, we're looking for the term A maturity date. It is told it is the 5th anniversary after the closing date. Since we've already gathered that metadata of the closing date, we could do the mathematics with agents to determine what the actual raw date is, because formatting matters. You can't necessarily just pass in 5th anniversary dates. You do need specifics, and the agents are able to do that data transformation for us. Now, lastly, now that we've talked about how we design these, how we run them, how we execute them, want to just take a brief look at what it looks like to monitor these processes at scale. As I back out here, I go from one live run to an aggregate. This is the credit agreement solution, but instead of looking at just one instance, I could see all of them. I could look at monitoring dashboards for this use case specifically to see exactly how things have ran and how they have performed over a given time horizon. Especially as we get into the agentic world, we're not talking about task automation. It's more of end-to-end outcome-based process automation and having visibilities into what's completed, what's not completed, what are the incidents, how long are they taking, are there certain spots that are more problematic than other spots, different versions as well as we innovate across the team and build different things. How have different versions performed in comparing those to other versions too? All of those are key aspects at the individual process level. And then, of course, if we back that up, we could see that at the organization or business unit level as well. So all of my Maestro processes, all of my business processes that are running, how are they performing? And similar to this view from the process side, we could also see these on the agentic slide. I could see my different agents that have ran over the last month, the last hour, the last week. As I go and refresh this, I can see the different amortization runs that have occurred. And I could also see different dashboards here as well that will show me information. I'll go here into the last month and look at the by creation time view and be able to pull up relevant information there as well. Lastly, so here when I go into the last month view, I could see all of the dashboard analytics. I can specify this based on the folder path, filter it by the last run, and see a lot of meaningful information specifically related to my agents, right? In the Maestro dashboard and analytics, we get to see things at the business process level, but I also want to see things at the detailed agent level. For the use case we just walked through, I could see my entity extraction agent, my signature detection, amortization balloon, as well as dashboards for these as well. What's failing, what's successful, what's stopped, all at the agent level. And then the last thing to call out here is everything that touches AI and LLMs is going to flow through the AI trust layer. So think of this as not necessarily related to a business process or an agent specifically, but more broadly, how are we organizationally interacting with LLMs, having compliance audit trails, insight into what is used, what the prompts were, what the input was, what the output was. You could see that exactly here. My system prompt that was used for processing in one of the agents. The AI trust layer is pretty much that full stop, one-shot pane of glass into all AI interactions within the entire platform. So with that, I'll conclude the demonstration and thank you for the time today.